Hello, welcome to the second video in our craft or copper art series. Today we're going to be looking at cutting, folding and joining sheet copper. Here are some images to whet your appetite. Some of them are by students, some of them are off the internet, and they're not all working with copper, but the principles are the same. So animals are a very popular theme working with metal, as you can see here. This is a student's fish, which I think combines some quite nice elements of assembly as well with the bolt. And we'll talk about how the textures are made later on. And this very, very careful boat, again by a student, but really very carefully constructed out of copper. But I love this one, very, very quirky, that I found on the internet. Look at the use of the keyhole, for example, just fits in perfectly, and the way that the things have been stitched together. Finally, this house. That's what I'm going to concentrate on today. I'm going to build some sort of quirky house because it will enable me to show you most of the techniques that you need to learn. So my first step has been to do some research on the internet. I typed in sculpture, houses, and I've tended to veer towards the things which look a little bit more ramshackle because that suits my temperament. Some of them are made out of cardboard, some out of metal, some out of mixed media, but they're all useful inspiration. So I'm going to begin to explore ideas, first of all, through two quicker methods, through drawing and through maquette making in cardboard. The pictures I downloaded just out of iShot, and I'm going to start exploring. These drawings don't need to be complicated or sophisticated. I'm just going to be working with a pen and keeping the shapes very simple. I'm using one of my favourite little pens because I can change the colour of the ink quite easily. So I quite like the boxy sort of structures that we get in, sort of one thing joining onto another, and with sort of slopes of roofs and chimneys. So I'm drawing ideas looking at the different pictures. Taking bits and combining together in my own sort of way. They're like my little building blocks. So I'm sort of going to go for something along this sort of lines, different levels and so on, and we'll just see how that evolves as I begin to make it. So now I'm going to start modelling in card, and in order to do that I just want to introduce you to a simple idea if you're not familiar with it, which is how to make sort of boxes using what are called nets. It's about N-E-T-T, a net. So here we have a simple net. I've cut the card first of all into a strip. It's 10 centimeters wide because that's the width of the pieces of copper that I've got, which were given to me off of somebody's roof when it was renovated. And then I've marked along 6 centimeters for the overall height of a wall, and each side is 5 centimeters, and there's a little extra as a tab to join it all together. And then I've put on a peaked roof and a window. And what I need to do is score these lines where it's going to fold and cut the thing out. I'm working with a craft knife, a steel ruler, and I'm working on a cutting mat, or you could use soft card. The point of a cutting mat isn't to protect the table, as you may have been told at school. The real purpose of a cutting mat is to protect yourself, because if you try cutting on a hard surface, when a knife goes through, it can stick and slip, and we want to avoid those sort of accidents. So a soft surface like a cutting mat is perfect. Right, so here goes. So here is my net, and I just take it and fold it to make my building, and glue gun that piece. A nice easy way to sort of think and plan things out. So I'm going to glue that together, put a little roof on, and I might add a few extra little details on it as well, like shutters. Okay, I got a little bit carried away. So this is the bit I was working on, and I added some shutters and a roof with corrugated card, a little cardboard chimney, and then I built similar boxes. This one didn't have a sloping roof, and I've cut out windows, and I've also glued on extra bits for things like sort of window sills, lintels, a little bit of cardboard for door handle here. And I've had a little railing as well, I thought might be quite nice around there, and even some round windows. So that's my little sort of model. I quite like some of those ideas. I think there's one or two things I might change. I think that's a little bit bulky, but we shall see. But anyway, I'm going to use this as a basis for a piece working in copper, and this planning has helped me just sort of work out what I want to do. This is a copper sheeting I'm going to be working with. As you can see, it's got all kinds of marks and quirks and dents in it. I could try and flatten all that out. It's been flattened to some extent, but I quite like that character, and I want to kind of keep that as part of the thing that I build. So I'm now going to mark on my net. I'm just going to turn this over because I noticed that that edge is straighter than that one, so I'll work over on this side, and I'm going to scratch it on with a brad awl. You could just wire a nail onto the end of something, a handle, firmly, and use something like that, or you could use a permanent marker pen like a Sharpie. So this time I just want to make sure that I get things at a proper right angle. I'm going to measure it all out just as before. So scratching it on 5, 4 sides, each 5 centimeters plus an extra 2 centimeters for a tab. I've gone back over those lines with a marker pen because they're very hard for you to see on the video, and now I'm going to cut out. I could just use the ordinary small snips, but because I've got a big pair and it's all straight lines, I might as well use this one. So just going to get those all cut. And I have to change direction and cut from this direction to get those bits. So I'm going to carry on, just cut all that out. See you in a minute. Now the outside is relatively easy to cut, but when it comes to this bit, I've got a little bit of a trickier issue. So what I do is cut in at an angle towards the line, carefully try to turn it and straighten it up, and then work along and cut that bit out like so. Then I turn it the other way around and cut it. Now I find that quite hard to do left-handed. It'd be easier if I was able to turn it over. So I'll do that. I'll redraw the line on and then cut it on this side. Little bit of a problem on smaller bits. It can be difficult to cut with those big ones, so I'm going to switch to smaller ones, and first of all I'm going to hammer that out. So if you do have this problem, this is how to resolve it. Make it flat again, and then take your smaller snips, which you should find are able to deal with that sort of smaller start a little bit easier. So move that out of the way, and I think you can see that it's managed to grip onto that small bit, but the blades are a bit too unrefined to do it with the large ones. If you have any rough edges, give them a light file. So just there's a little bit rough. There, and the filing is just to make sure that you don't end up cutting yourself. So now I want to take out some windows. I'll draw them on first and then show you how to take them out. So it would be possible just about to take that out with something like a Dremel, a hobby tool, but I'm going to do a different method, which is to drill a hole through first and then cut. And you could use the masking tape method I showed in the last session to help stop the drill bit from skidding, but I'm going to use a different method, which is to use a dot punch to create a little dot I can then use to hold the drill bit in place. There. Now remember that it is quite possible that the drill bit can get stuck and the whole thing can spin around, so it's important to clamp if you can. One should be sufficient. So now I'm going to drill a pilot hole, and then I'm going to drill a bigger hole for the biggest drill bit I've got. So now to enlarge that, to take that section out, you could use a coping saw like this. Essentially you undo the handle slip the blade out, pushing it until it comes out. Take the blade out, slide it through, reconnect it, and then you can saw inside that hole. But I'm going to use an easier method. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my curved small tin snips. I'm going to cut to the corner. It's getting ever so dark. Can you see that all right? I've cut that. I'm going to get this board back because I'm going to work on top of that. I need to flatten this off a little bit. And now I'm going to take a pair of pliers, long nose ones are the best, turn it over and pull this and fold it over. And you see that? I'm just taking that and I'm folding it over to zoom the camera in a little bit. And move it across so you can hopefully see just a little bit clearer. So taking this and folding it, trying to get it past 90 degrees if I can. Quick word on wrist. If you've got a weak wrist, it's a good idea to put a sports support on when you're doing this sort of work, because it requires a certain amount of twisting of your wrist. I'm sort of can feel it sort of pulling a little bit. Anyway, I've got that over, and now I carefully, whoops, what was that? Tap that over. And there is my window. So now I put the windows in, I'm going to fold along the score lines. There's a couple of different methods that you could use. For longer folds, take two pieces of wood like so, clamp them, and then fold. And you can just about do it with your hands, and then you beat it along that line. So I've got that clamped between two pieces of wood, folded it over, and then take a small hammer and that I think you'll find come on. Produces a nice, good right angle. However, with smaller pieces like this, you can actually do it with the long nose pliers. I'm going to grip it along the line, to bend it. I'm going to go to the other side and bend it and repeat. And that gives a pretty good bend. Of course, it can't be any bigger than the twice the length of the longest pliers. There. That's now ready to join together. So I'm going to join it along that seam. Now I could solder along that seam, but today I'm going to look at using rivets instead. So I've clamped it, and I've used the dot points to make some little dents to start the drill off. I'm going to put a piece of wood on the inside, so to give a solid surface to drill onto, and I'm going to drill out the holes. Now the drill bit that I'm using is the same size as the ends on these pop rivets, so it's the same width as this, so that can then go in the hole. So let's get those drilled. So I've clamped one side whilst I drill two. So that hole has been drilled through both sides. If I just take that off, you'll see. I now take the pop rivet and insert that end in, and then I have a rivet gun. I'm going to zoom out so you can see this a little bit easier. So my rivet gun, I place that on there. Shouldn't have taken the clamp off because it's more difficult. I'll turn it sideways so you can see it's better. And I squeeze the two halves together. I release, make sure it's nice and tightly on. As I say, it would have been better if I left the clamp on. And then I squeeze again until it goes pop. Sideways, so you can see. Try to squeeze, let go, make sure it's repositioned, and squeeze again. That's better. That's how it should have gone. You see that that's been broken off. I can now drill the third hole, again inserting the piece of wood in, and rivet that one. And this bit of rivet I will just snip off. I'm going to solder on a windowsill and a couple of shutters, which I'm going to try to solder on sticking out a little bit like that. So the first thing I need to do is make sure that these are really well cleaned. So working with a wire wool and take my time to really clean it well. So when you clean them, you want to make sure that you reveal shiny metal where you are going to be joining to make sure you get the best chance of getting a good join. And I want to join that on there at an angle, so I've folded a little piece of copper, which I'm going to place there and use as a support, like so. I need to get some flux along that joint. Fit that on there, and when I start to heat this, it's going to tarnish all of the cleaned areas along here. So it's a pretty good idea to try, if you can, to solder several all those pieces at once. But that would make it harder for you to see what I'm doing. So I'm just going to do one at a time. Put my gloves on. I've got my bottle of water ready to cool it down as soon as it's soldered. Where's my solder? So, light my soldering torch. See that nice flame there? Heat. Use the point of the flame. You can see the flux melting straight away. Get that solder into that joint. Introduce it. And that's it. Okay, so I'm going to solder on the other shutter and the windowsill now, and then a windowsill on the back window as well. So I've soldered the windowsill and the shutters on. A bit of discoloration we can do later on. Now I've got to make a roof, and I had a few different ideas about the roof. The first one was this idea. On the back I've been hitting the copper with a round chisel. Where is it? Here it is, an old round chisel, and that creates that pattern on the other side, which is brought out with a little bit of cleaning. Another idea I had was old pennies, or coppers, soldering those together to make the roof. A third idea was to cut strips like shingles. So you cut a strip and then cut part way into it and join those together. But what I originally had on the model was corrugated card, and I really quite like that. So I've come up with an idea for that, and this is what I've managed to make very straightforwardly. If I just show you, I've scored or drawn lines on here about a centimetre apart, and because it's quite small, I can use the round nose pliers to bend just a little bit, like so, in one direction, and then bend in the other direction to create a corrugation. See that happening? So I'm going to do that for both sides and then solder the roof on. I've soldered the roof on, and a little roof ridge as well. I had to make it out of two parts because there's a bit of a curve, sort of bend in the middle, but it just adds to its ramshackle look. And now I'm going to add a chimney. I've taken a piece of pipe and I've cut it at an angle to fit onto the roof, and then just snipped in the sides and pulled them out a little bit, splayed them slightly, as you can see, so it sits neatly on top of the roof. And what I'm going to do is prop it up so that by putting that underneath, so that sits nice and flat and doesn't move on there in order to solder it. So here's my little soldering setup. Notice the copper used as wedges to hold it in place, and the fire brick at the back to reflect the heat. So that should allow me to solder that fairly easily. So here's my finished unit. This is just one part of what will be a larger building. Hopefully you can see that I could clean it up, or I could leave these sort of stains and little blobs and so on as part of its character. So I'm now going to make two more sections and then look at joining them all together. So I've now got my three different elements that I'm going to join together. This one, notice the bars in the window. They were soldered, I don't know if you can quite see, but soldered on the inside. Little door soldered on there. If I just bring up the camera, hopefully you can just about see a rivet for a doorknob. You need to tidy up a little bit of the soldering in places. This one got a little bit of a base and a stovepipe coming out the side, and also these circular windows. I'm just about to see those. So there's a hole been drilled and then a small piece of pipe, copper piping soldered on there. So I've got these different elements. I'm going to join them together, something like this. And the most straightforward way to join these is going to be by soldering them together. And then I'll add a little bit more detail, and that will be the little model finished. So here's the final model, which I'm going to turn around for you so you can see from different directions. I could clean it up, but I quite like the all the different marks and so on. Even the dribbling bits of solder look quite good, I think. Well, I hope you found that useful. I'm going to now show you a few pictures of other examples of working with sheets of copper, and also combine it with wire. Bye bye for now.